When it's time to edit an image, here are some tools that every Photoshop user needs to be familiar with. The Levels tool is really the key to understanding how Photoshop manipulates pixels when you edit an image. Let's open up a file, Control-O on the PC, Command-O on the Mac. We're inside our Chapter 3 folder and we're going to open the file Full Range. Now in the last chapter we turned rulers on, we're going to turn them off. Up in the View menu, scroll down to where it says Rulers and select it. Now when we made our custom workspace, we included a histogram panel. So let's click on it to open it up, and let's make two quick changes. Here in the flyout panel in the far right, I want you to set it to expanded view, and to the right of channels, instead of colors, let's set the histogram to luminosity. Now the histogram is a graph that shows the distribution of pixels in your image based on one thing only: brightness. So it shows you how many pixels reside at a particular level of brightness. The far left end of the histogram is reserved for maximum deep dark shadows. The far right end of the histogram is reserved for complete super duper blown out whites. Remember that Photoshop works on a level of 0 to 255 in terms of image brightness. So let's see how that translates to this image of the waterfall. If we start over here on the left, down at a level of about 3, and note that we have here level and count. I want you to pay attention to those. We have no pixels at this location. There's no data here in the graph. It's all empty. But as we move over to, say, a level of 25, we start to get some pixels. 25 is a relatively dark tone. As we move over to the right, just underneath where this peak is, at a level of about 60, 61, we can see that's where we have the greatest number of pixels in this image. And we've actually, if you look at count, we've got 3,260 pixels residing at that level. As we move over to the right, we're heading towards our mid-tone areas. Now we're at a level of 128, and we have a small little peak there, a little hump. We've got 818 pixels at that mid-tone level. And as we move over here along the right, another little hump comes down, tapers off nicely, so that by the time we get over here to a level of 250, we have no pixels occupying that range. So the histogram is really just a diagram of where our pixels fall in terms of brightness. Now there's no such thing as a perfect histogram. Each image is going to have its own unique shape. Let's open up a few. Control-O on the PC, Command-O on the Mac. This time we're going to open up multiple images. So I'm going to click Shadow down here at the bottom. And now I'm going to hold the Control key on the PC. On the Mac, it'll be the Command key. I'm going to Control-Command-Click on Mid, Control-Command-Click on Highlight, and Control-Command-Click on Clipping. We're going to open up 4 files at the same time. With those selected, I simply press the Return key, and Photoshop is going to open up all 4 files. Now this shadow image, this is highlighted in the tab, so that's the image we're looking at. Look at the shape of its histogram. It's bunched all the way over to the left. That means that we have the greatest number of pixels devoted to the darker range of brightness. And you can see the image is a dark image. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it has a lot of dark pixels. If we go and click on the tab that says Highlight, open that image up, we'll see that we have almost the reverse. We have no pixels at the shadow end, no pixels in the mid-tone area. All the pixels are bunched over to the right. Let's take a look at a third image. Let's click on the tab called Mid. And let's see what that image looks like. Here, the bulk of our pixels are in the mid-tone range. They're all bunched up in the middle of the histogram. So really the histogram is image dependent. It's going to change depending on what image you're looking at. There is one thing, however, that you don't ever want to see. Let's go and open up this file called Clipping. You can see at the far right of that histogram, we have for the first time a slender peak that butts right up against the right end of the histogram. That means that pixels have been clipped, or there's no data for them. That's the one thing that we do want to avoid with a histogram. In this image, the greatest number of pixels is residing at that maximum level, that would be 255, and if a pixel is at 255, it's just pure white. There's no detail, no information. And we can see in the image that corresponds to this area here with our blown out sky. There's no detail, no information in there, and that's a situation that we'd like to avoid at all costs. Similarly, if you had an image where that peak butted right up against the left edge for the shadows, then you'd have plug with no detail. So those are really the only two scenarios we want to avoid with the histogram. Otherwise, just get used to the fact that different images are going to have different shapes in the histogram. If this warning icon in the histogram panel has been bugging you for the past 6 minutes, you can simply click to update the cache that Photoshop is using to display the histogram. Click and it's gone, the histogram is updated. Now let's jump to the Levels tool. We're going to click on Full Range, open up Image, Adjustments, and the Levels tool. We've got our Levels dialog box here. Notice that in the Levels dialog we have the histogram. So let's close this histogram panel. We don't need to see it twice. In this Levels dialog box we've got 3 sliders beneath the histogram. One at the left for the shadows, a gray one in the middle for the midtones, and one on the far right for the highlights. And this is how the Levels tool works. We move these sliders. Right now in this image, any pixel indicated by a graph in the histogram that resides above where this slider is pointing is going to be set to maximum black. So if I drag this over to the right, I have set all of these pixels directly above it to be maximum black. If these pixels above it are maximum black, any pixels that initially were residing to the left are also going to be maximum black. And let's move this out of the way so you can see what it does to the image. Not only does it darken the shadows, it destroys the unique pixel values of a lot of areas in this image. Here, we'll slide it back out. This is where we started. As we drag this to the right, any pixel value that was here is now maximum black. So before we had a distinction between pixels that were darker, pixels that were even darker. Now they have all been set to the same value. I'll slide this back out. Same thing will happen on the highlight end. If we click this highlight slider and drag it over to the left, now any pixels that are residing directly above this are set to maximum white, meaning any pixels that were brighter than that initially are also set to maximum white. So this is actually clipping colors and throwing away unique pixel information, setting them all, in this case, to maximum white. This middle slider indicates where a pixel is going to be at a middle brightness value. So if we drag it to the left, the image brightens because now these pixels, which were dark, are now at a middle level of brightness. If we drag this slider to the right, the image gets darker because these pixels, which were bright, have now been brought down to a middle level of brightness. And that's how you use the Levels tool. You can quickly change the brightness and darkness of the entire image just by moving those 3 sliders. The Curves tool, while a bit harder to wrap your head around, offers a degree of precision and control that is unrivaled in Photoshop. Let's start with a new image. Control-O on the PC, Command-O on the Mac to open. In our Chapter 3 folder, we are going to open the image titled Curves. Now this is going to open up by default in our standard screen view. Let's go up to the Applications bar, and we're going to select Full Screen Mode with Menu Bar. We could also use our handy shortcut F key to do this. Now we're going to go to Image, Adjustments, and Curves. And this is why we switch to screen mode. Over the image, I'm going to press the space bar to invoke the hand key. You remember that from lesson 2, right? We're going to move this over here so that we can see both the image and the curves dialog box at the same time. Now there's an option here I want you to set in Curve Display Options. I want you to click and open that up. Drag this box up to the top. Under Show, I'd like for you to turn off the check mark for intersection line. We don't want to really confuse ourselves with too many things to look at one time, but do make sure that under Show Amount Of, you have the radio button set for light. This will give us our 0 to 255 numbers that we've been talking about all along. So we can close this options box now. In the Curves dialog window, first thing you're likely to notice is that we have a histogram behind it. So this should look very familiar to us. We have a triangle on the left and one on the right, again very similar to what we saw in the Levels tool. And Curves is oriented in the same way. Shadows are on the far left, highlights are on the far right. Every curve starts with a diagonal line that represents no change to the image. Now let's see how this tool works. we're going to go click on the On Image Adjustment tool. That's this finger hand icon with the up and down arrows. We're going to click on it to select it. And as I hover the mouse around the image, I'm not clicking, I'm not dragging, I'm simply hovering over the image. Note that in the main window of the Curves dialog, we have a hollow circle that is moving along that diagonal line. That hollow circle represents the brightness value of the pixel located directly underneath my cursor. So as I'm